In 1789, at the start of the bloody French Revolution, the streets of Paris were in the grip of violent mobs. The famous jail at the Bastille was stormed, the inmates set free. Aristocrats and the monarchy were hunted down, imprisoned, and executed in a horrifying period known as the Terror. In place of the king, France installed a republic, and in 1804, Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself emperor. Napoleon made Paris grand enough to be the capital of his expanding empire. He built the Arc de Triomphe, the Triumphal Arch, in honor of his military conquests. But it is Bonaparte's nephew, Napoleon III, who is destined to have the greatest impact on modern Paris. By 1850, the population of Paris was 1 million. The city groaned under the weight of too many people in too small a space. Traffic was at a halt, trade static. Emperor Napoleon III, nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte, drafted a radical new plan to rebuild Paris, to build wide streets, improve traffic flow, and clear the slums that fostered unrest and violence.
You had many winding streets, you had decaying houses, overcrowded houses, slums, also where the streets were not clean. It was really a city of the old times.
Napoleon appointed Eugene Haussmann as the man to implement his plan. His assignment, to bring Paris up to date and make sure that revolution never happened again. Paris was a network of narrow streets, some with open sewers. There was no running water. At night, these streets were deserted, dark and squalid, everyone too terrified to venture out. Many of these streets were within feet of some of the city's most famous buildings.
Just close to Notre Dame, we have the only remaining part of what Paris looked like. Now here we see something which is characteristic of the narrowness of these streets. And this was the ordinary width of a street. This was exactly how the streets in old Paris looked like.
These narrow streets were home to hundreds of thousands living in poverty. If Haussmann was to clear these filthy slums, he would have to deal with the people who lived there.
Now, there is also a question. What happens with the people who are occupying these buildings? Where are they going? Haussmann thought, like a majority of the Parisian bourgeoisie, that if they could go to hell, it would be the best thing.
Haussmann bought up the land, moved the slum dwellers to the outskirts, and then turned his attention to the constant gridlock that plagued the city's streets. With the arrival of new railways into Paris, his vision was to link all the main stations with wide boulevards so that traffic flowed faster.
There was absolutely no link between any of these railway stations and the others. And this meant that going from one region of France to another region of France with the obligation to go through Paris meant an enormous effort and enormous difficulties just to come across Paris.
This boulevard was built to link two of the main stations in the north of Paris to the city center. Wide and fast, it wasn't just an expressway. There was space for large sidewalks and trees. With this as his blueprint, Haussmann then carved more large boulevards running up and down and across the city. He built more roads radiating off the Arc de Triomphe, another grand Parisian landmark, and he widened the Champs-Élysées, the most famous boulevard in the world. By easing traffic congestion, Haussmann believed that both Paris and the economy would grow. Paris was a giant construction site. Slums were torn down and replaced by apartment buildings that conformed to Haussmann's specifications. The height of his buildings was exactly 66 feet. Haussmann was only interested in the facade, the look of the long boulevards with their newly built apartments. His concern was to give Paris a modern, uniform look.
There we can see the typical Haussmann buildings with the always orderly shop on the ground floor, then the mezzanine, then the first floor with a full balcony, the second, the third one with small balconies, and then the one which is, let's say, perhaps the most difficult to rent because it's higher and you don't have the elevator when it is built, but you have a full-scale balcony on the top which enables you to benefit the view and also the fresh air.
But Haussmann's grand design had a second, secret agenda. His wide, straight boulevards owed as much to military strategy as they did to urban planning. Little did Parisians know, but Haussmann was about to make their city ideal for soldiers to stop rioting.
The problem of security never has been absent from Napoleon's preoccupations. There had been so many riots with bloodsheds, with destruction, etc., that nearly all the population of Paris really wanted to have security in Paris.
In the middle of this square, in the east end of Paris, a cavalry regiment. Mounted soldiers were in these barracks to control this side of Paris, historically where riots and revolution usually started. But they needed a clear line of sight down this boulevard to communicate with their infantry comrades stationed 3 miles away to the southeast. The problem, this new boulevard needed to cross over the obstruction of a canal that brought water and freight into Paris. A bridge over the canal would have blocked their view and made it easier for rioters to erect barricades and cut off this part of Paris. Haussmann's radical and costly solution was to order his astonished engineers to dig the canal underground for over a mile, so there was no need for a bridge at all. It was an extraordinary feat of engineering, taking just 2 years to complete. There was no electricity at the time, and running shipping through this underground canal in the center of Paris in complete darkness was unthinkable. The engineers came up with an ingenious solution to provide both light and air.
In this tunnel, apart from the few illuminated signs that you can see in front, there's no electricity, no electric lighting. All the navigational lighting comes from skylights, which are cut into the roof. You can see one of them. It's just up here.
These skylights allowed daylight and fresh air to flood in. Like a series of beacons or landing lights, they guided the barges safely down the middle of the canal.
It's very clever and completely up to date. It's in absolutely original condition. It's almost better than that, because it is so well preserved.
In a combination of interests typical of Haussmann, Parisian barges kept their shortcut to the River Seine in the center of Paris, and the military kept their clear line of sight to prevent riots. In less than 30 years, Haussmann dramatically redrew the map of Paris. His new boulevards linked all parts of the city for the first time. He expanded the city's boundaries into new communities to encourage more people to come to Paris. And he built parks, the first time that Parisians had communal areas simply for relaxation. However much Haussmann reshaped Paris, he didn't give the city its single greatest landmark. That distinction fell to engineer Gustave Eiffel. Built in 1889, the Eiffel Tower is the one building that truly identifies Paris. This unique film shows the first images of the finished Eiffel Tower taken in 1900. It is some of the earliest movie footage ever shot. Completed in just 2 years, the Eiffel Tower was a product of the rapid progress of engineering. It was constructed out of steel girders bolted together into what was then the tallest building in the world. It launched Paris onto the world stage. In a frenzy of construction, another bridge was built across the Seine using the same steel and bolt technology. The latest craze for this new super-strong material was combined with flamboyant decoration in a celebration of Paris's historic past. In drawing up his grand plan for Paris, Haussmann expected the city's population to reach a maximum of 3 million. Little did he know that even in modern times, the growth of Paris would once again be threatened by war and invasion.